Welcome to Sculpture Studios. Here we've been contacted by a client called Liz Smith for a company called AKQA. We've worked with this company in the past on the Panasonic job, where we created items like a giant pigeon, a conker, and the giant ZX1 camera. In keeping with this oversized props theme, we're working with them once again, and creating 2 giant pawns, 2 knights, and a lion centerpiece as the king. Here you can see the initial concept images of the lion chess piece, and the design changes that were made once the project was approved. It seems that after we quoted for the piece on the left and the project got the go-ahead, all the CAD designers got quite excited and went to town a little more on the visuals, making them more elaborate. Although this did now require a little more work on our end, we didn't mind these changes at this point as the new designs improved the sculpture. It's always best that changes are made at the start of a project during the concept stage, rather than causing more problems by changing later on. To begin a project like this, we usually request for a model to be sent to our studio, but seeing as this was only a concept created on CAD, we were sent visuals from the client's program. With the absence of a 3D model, these images allow us to see the piece from multiple viewpoints. We're beginning here by creating the pawns first, and for this, Aden is making use of our homemade turntable. Much like an oversized potter's wheel, only made out of various pieces of a washing machine and a few electrics, believe it or not, this can be sped up and slowed down so that we can carve round objects quite quickly. We've used this for items in the past like the Belvedere vodka rocket and the giant crinkled plastic cup that we actually made for the AKQA Panasonic job. Once Aden is happy with the form, the whole thing is sanded down and the pattern is given a layer of our own blend of soft filler. For both the pawns and the knights, we're actually using our own Staunton chess set to model the pieces from. This is often the best kind of reference for us to work from, as we're effectively blowing up an already 3D version of the sculpture into a larger scale. For the knight, Aden's cut large pieces of polystyrene off using a hot wire, and is using wire brushes to hone down on the shape. Only one of each of these chess pieces needs to actually be carved, as we're going to create a fiberglass mould in order to extract 2 identical casts from. Once again, we're going over with fillers and sanding all the patterns down, so that minimal cleaning up is required when it comes to taking each cast out of the mould. For the pawn here, we're creating the mould in 2 halves, and we're going over the pattern with release agents first, and then 3 layers of 2-ounce glass fibre. We've created a wall around the edge so that when the 2 halves are put together, they can be bolted to hold the mould in place. This 6-ounce build-up of glass fibre will work out to be strong enough to withstand the manipulation of having 2 complete casts taken from it. Aden agrees. We've used a release agent and a gel coat on the inside of each half before we've laminated with glass fibre, and here we're bolting the mould together to laminate over the seam line down the middle. For the knight, the mould is slightly more complex due to the shape, and here you can see we're using a flexible plastic to make up the walls in order to make a dividable mould. This will all work in the same way as the pawn, with all the sections being able to bolt together once they're laminated, so the seam lines can then be joined. With these sculptures being made from fiberglass, this will ensure that they can withstand being outside in the elements for the duration of the event. Not only do we believe this may only be for 1 or 2 days over the weekend, potentially a couple of weeks, but if required they can last for much longer. We've had some pieces of sculpture outside in the public eye now for many years, and more often than not, when we're creating enjoyable pieces like these that have no future intended use, we find that clients don't want to dispose of them after the event has ended. They say they want to keep hold of them at the end of the day, so it's quite good that we make them strong enough so that this can happen. After all the seam lines have been filled and cleaned up, we end up with something like this that's ready to be worked up to a good finish. In the bottom of each piece we're adding half a wooden base plate, so that when it's positioned on site, weights can be added to the inside to help hold it down. As the client eventually wants everything to have a marble look, we need to make sure all the surfaces are smooth enough to airbrush, as well as smooth enough to be touch realistic. Everything needs to catch the light just right once it's all been lacquered, and this can only be achieved by a really smooth finish. Here we're beginning work on the more ornate base for the lion chess piece. We're creating the pattern as per the client's design, and we're using a mix of polystyrene, clay and other materials to emulate the correct shape. For the architectural part of the base where the lion will actually stand on, only 1/4 is being modelled in clay. Once Aden's happy with the design and confirmed it all with the client, we've taken a silicone mould with a fiberglass jacket so that 4 identical quarters can be laid up and replicated. Here you can see the silicone rubber being taken off of one of the casters now. We've used a gel coat first to get into all the detail of the mould, and then followed up with fiberglass for strength. Silicone is perfect for this form of mould as it allows for a high level of detail and an easy flexible extraction of each cast. All 4 pieces are then aligned and joined up on the inside using glass fibre and resin once again. The seam line on the exterior is then sanded and filled and made invisible so the 4 quarters look like one complete piece. For the other half of the base that you saw us making earlier, we've created a mould for this as well so a really strong cast can be made from glass fibre. We clean up the moulds and keep everything nice and neat, so all the pieces are always safe for our team to handle. Here we've only made a silicone rubber insert for the more intricate area, and making sure the rubber is fully pushed into the mould before it's cast. We're also temporarily filling the seam line so that less cleaning up is necessary once the cast is extracted. For the fiberglassing, it's always important that we add a few extra layers to bump up the thickness at the very bottom of the sculpture. This is the part that's going to be in contact with the ground and runs the most risk of getting knocked, kicked or bumped into. We're moving on to the centrepiece of our project now, the lion figure itself. Made to stand around 6 foot tall, not including the base below, we're blocking out from our 8 foot billet of polystyrene to get a basic cubist form. We begin by drawing the outlines of the front and side onto the block, and as usual we're using hot wires to cut out the peripherals. This will then give us a good starting block to begin carving from. As all of our sculptures are carved by hand, we use measurements, concept image references, and a basic well-practiced eye for size, shape and positioning. It's always a good sign that we're nice and busy in our studio when we get to call in one or more of our freelance sculptors, and here Chris is creating the overall form of the piece before Aden hones down on some of the detail. Line's looking a little raw here, Chris. Here at Sculpture Studios, the absolute top-class banter comes completely free of charge. Believe it or not, all of these jokes are actually manufactured right here in the studio as well. Chris, you're taking great pride in your work.
It's the main event.
Aren't you supposed to have him finished today, Chris? Isn't there a clause in your contract? He looks ill, Chris. Is he a bit poorly? You better not be lying to me. Once the main bulk of the terrible jokes are out of the way and the overall form is finished, Aden begins working on the detail. Now what we originally quoted for was a master carving, as you can see here, and what's known as a waste mould made from plaster. This usually allows for one cast to be extracted and then it's cleaned up. Oh, hold on, I think I can squeeze one more in here for Aden. Looking perfect, Aden. So instead of this mould making route that we originally quoted for, due to the complexity of the line shape and wanting to guarantee that we preserve as much of the original pattern as possible, we decided to go down the blanket coat route. This works out to be the same cost-wise for the client, as though it takes more time to clean up the blanket finish, we're saving money from the mould making process. We thought this would be the better option so as to keep the sculpture in as few pieces as possible, and we could spend more time working up the surface finish. Here we've gone over with our familiar sticky back foil to protect the polystyrene, and we're laying up with glass fibre mat and general purpose resin. As these sculptures are designed to be placed outside, they needn't have the fire rating certificate like indoor sculptures would need to have. We're using general purpose as opposed to Class O rated resin, once again to help bring the cost down for the client on the material prices. With the head and the body made and laminated in 2 sections, we've now joined them at the neckline with glass fibre. We're using a liquid resin mix here to make good the seam line, and this doubles up and covers the fiberglass texture. We've also used this resin mix on the matte texture on the hair as well, with the view to sanding it back to a good finish. But as we applied it using a brush across the surface of the hair, we found that rather than having to sand the whole thing down, the natural streaks that the brush left looked perfect for the hair texture, so we've left this as a nice realistic touch. Throughout the sculpture there are bits and pieces of metal work, The line itself has fixtures running down through the interior of the legs and out the bottom of the feet, so it can be fixed securely into the base below. We've had a large steel 4-foot square base plate made that will both join the top and bottom sections of the base together and will act as a stage weight for the 10-foot tall sculpture. We've also included a trapdoor in the bottom section of the stand so we can gain access to the interior and bolt it all together, and more weight can be added inside on site if it's necessary. Here you can see one of the visuals the client sent us, and the reveal of the 3D version brought into real life. We've gone over all of the pieces with the 2K car body paint, and this is suitable for outdoor use. With this as a base layer, Aden then begins working on the airbrushed marble effect. Building up what's known as veins throughout the stone, multiple layers of paint are worked onto the surface to give that natural look of organic marble. Though it takes some practice, it's a simple but very effective way of creating expensive looking items that look as though they should weigh a lot more than they do and can actually be moved around quite easily, and they can be made for bespoke purposes like this. It's also more cost effective for our client than if she were to go down the method of having them made from real stone. As we've worked hard to get a really good surface finish on these, you can see how well the marble look adheres to the sculpture after the 2K gloss lacquer is applied. This is then polished up so it catches the light just like polished marble should do. Aiden's just given it the finishing touches now, and here's his thoughts on the health and safety aspect that we thought important to raise with the client in regards to the small changes made to the claws.
Okay, what we've got here is the claws coming out here. In the original brief they were sticking right out there, which was very dangerous. They were eye level and head level, and I can see them getting broken in transit as well. So we thought we'd first of all make them in foam, which can be bent and they wouldn't sort of take people's eyes out, but we just didn't get the quality of finish here and here. So what we've made them is in fast cast, and we've planted them right up through here, and they've got wires running through the horns as well, and they've come out really, really nice, and I'm glad we've put them in because we know when it leaves the studio it's nice and safe as well. So yeah, really pleased.
As usual, we take a few finish shots in our studio before they're picked up to be delivered, and these have actually gone down to the south of France to the Cannes Festival for the Future Lions 2015 event. The idea is that young entrepreneurs and young minds with new ideas have a platform to suggest, distribute and promote their concepts, and the chess pieces symbolise making your move. We'd like to thank Liz from AKQA for coming to us with the project. Hopefully the sculptures were well received and perhaps they were kept for future use. Please feel free to leave any comments below, as they're always appreciated, and hit the subscribe button for our latest videos. You can like Sculpture Studios on Facebook, and for more of our work, visit sculpturestudios.co.uk. Thank you very much for watching.